Story time about the bestiality children next door. If you don't know what bestiality is, hold on. So I was living in this neighborhood for 5 years. Throughout those 5 years, not one time did my family go and talk to the other neighbors. Why didn't we talk to the other neighbors? Because it's not like we were trying to make friends or anything. We didn't care for them. Well, one day, the neighbors' kids were playing outside while I was playing outside. My mom urged me to go over there and play with the other kids, even though I didn't really want to. So there was a little boy and a little girl. I went over there and I asked if I could pet their dog because they were playing with their dog. They said yes, and the dog started playing with me and started licking my face. Yeah, keep that in mind. Then we started talking about the bus because we ride the same bus. We have the same bus stop. After playing with them for a while, they invited me inside. I asked my mom if I could go. She said yes. So the little boy ran into his room and then the little girl invited me to her room. So to pass time, I asked her what she does for fun. She said she plays with her brother. And then she asked if I liked animals. Obviously, I say yes, and so she asked to show me a trick. That's when she brings the dog into the room and proceeds to pull down her pants, like for part 2. This is part 2 of the bestiality children next door. Like I said, she brings her dog into the room and pulls down her pants. Totally forgot a very crucial piece of information. I was in 5th grade at the time. That's why I did what I did in these next events. So she pulls down her pants and lets the dog go at it. The same dog that licked my face previously. The dog went for it. He knew what to do. The only words that I could form was ew. She had trained this dog to do that. So after I said ew, she immediately got up and put her pants up, and she was surprised that I was grossed out like any normal human being wouldn't be. Then out of nowhere, she starts crying and I started feeling really bad, so I told her that I wouldn't tell anybody. And so she tells me I had to switch to my dog because my hamster wouldn't do it. Then she gets up and opens this drawer and proceeds to pull out a dead hamster. She says he wouldn't lick, he would only bite. She starts crying really hard and says she feels uncomfortable and she would feel better if I let the dog do what it did to her. As much as I didn't want to, I wanted her to feel comfortable, so I did it. This is part 3 of the bestiality children next door. Like I said, I gave in. I didn't know how it was supposed to feel. It felt weird, but it didn't feel good. So I stopped and she started giggling and I just felt so uncomfortable, so I wanted to go home. Then she started acting like she was annoyed and started getting really mad at me. But I was like, whatever, and so she let me leave. Well, it was a Sunday that day and the next day we had to go to school, but she wasn't at the bus stop. And so I get on the bus and I go to school that day and everything is fine. Until halfway through the school day, my mom comes to pick me up early. She would never come to pick me up early for no reason. I would usually have an appointment and I would know about it before. I would know if I was going to leave school that day and was going to get picked up, but I wasn't notified. So my mom came to pick me up, and while we were on the way home, she said that my dad had stayed home from work that day, and when we got home, we were going to have a talk about what I did with the neighbor's dog. I promise you're going to want to like for part 4. This is part 4 of the bestiality children next door. Baby, that rhymed. Like I said, my mom is driving me home right now and we're gonna have a talk when we get home with my dad about what I did with the neighbor's dog. I tried to explain myself to her in the car, but she wouldn't let me talk. She didn't want me to say anything until we got home. But when we got home, it wasn't just my dad sitting in the living room. The neighbors were there. The mom, dad, and the 2 kids. So I was like, is this a setup? And the neighbor's dad is fuming. As soon as I walked into the living room, he stood up and tried to get in my face. Mind you, I was in 5th grade. He did that in front of my parents. My parents told him to back up, obviously, but there was a lot of tension. When he was in my face, he was saying, how dare you force my daughter to do that with our own dog? That's when I knew what the fuck was going on. This little fucker. Basically, after I left my neighbor's house the day before, the daughter went up to the parents and told them that I showed her the trick with the dog and forced her to do it. But this is when things take a turn, babes. This is part 5 of the bestiality children next door. Like I said, my neighbor's parents and their kids and my parents and I were all in my living room discussing about this dog situation. So I went ahead and explained myself that she was a fucking liar and that nothing that's coming out of her mouth was true and that she was just lying and lying. And the neighbor's parents weren't too happy about the fact that I was calling their daughter a liar. And the mom just lost it and started screaming at me and going at me and just saying all these mean, terrible things. It was almost as if she had a personal problem with me. Well, baby. So I started crying really hard once the neighbor's mom started yelling at me. I don't know what that did to the neighbor's daughter, but she folded. She said, I lied. I'll tell you guys the truth. She finally admitted that it was her idea and she's the one who introduced it to me. Then once her parents expressed their disapproval, this fucking child, she says, I thought it was okay because I saw mom doing it when dad wasn't home. Story time about how my brother caught me hooking up with his girlfriend. My brother started dating this girl last year and they were hanging out every day. Also around that time last year, I started to figure out my sexuality. Well, since my brother and her would hang out every single day at my house, I would see her all the time. And I started to get little feelings. Something came over me, baby. I was like, God is a woman. I just kind of came to the conclusion that I liked girls. Since she was dating my brother and they were home all the time, me and her kind of started talking too. We exchanged Snapchats, just a friendly exchange. Keep in mind that at the time, she didn't know my sexuality. Nobody did. So that night after we exchanged Snapchats, I was Snapchatting somebody else and I was sending them some explicit pictures. Since I recently just added my brother's girlfriend on Snapchat, her name was at the top. So I accidentally clicked on her name and sent her the explicit picture. I didn't even realize that I did that until I received a snap from her out of nowhere. And she had sent an explicit picture back, like for part 2. This is part 2 of how my brother caught me hooking up with his girlfriend. So like I said, I accidentally sent my brother's girlfriend an explicit picture on Snapchat. Not knowing that I even sent it, I received an explicit picture back from her. I said, baby, I'll really bite your titties. Stop playing with me. But after she sent me the picture, I responded with hard eyes, and then she texted me and said that she would be coming over tomorrow to hang out with my brother. I basically said, cool, I'll see you around, and then she came over the next day. So the next day came and she was at my house, but I wasn't talking to her. She was with my brother. And then she walks into my room. I was like, hey, where's Rob? We'll just call the brother that. She said she sent him to the store to get some snacks. I asked if she wanted to come chill on my bed. She agreed. And right off the bat, we started, we getting it bonking, having a good time. That's when the door swings open and there my brother is standing at my doorway. Like for part 3. This is going to be part 3 of the time my brother caught me hooking up with his girlfriend. So my brother swung my door open and there he was standing at my door watching me and his girlfriend while we were... Immediately, he was just like, oh, really? You're both fucking gross. That's when he turned around and left. Later on, we had to have like a family talk about this and I had to come out about my sexuality to my parents and it was really embarrassing. My parents were super accepting of me coming out, but my brother wasn't as accepting and I'm thinking it's mostly because of the fact that he had to find out the way that he did. Because it wasn't my sexuality itself that bothered him, it was how he found out. Later on, he told me that he walked into my room because he heard us laughing in there and he wanted to ask her what exactly she wanted from the store. He was gonna ask her if she just wanted to come with, but that's what he walked in on. So my brother went ahead and broke up with his girlfriend. That's when me and her started dating and we've been dating for about 2 years now. So I said I'd be sharing more stories of things that happened to me while I was younger that I've kept secret for my entire life and haven't told anybody, so here's another story. Fair warning, this video might be a little triggering. I was really young at the time. I don't exactly remember what age. I was around 8 or 13 years old. Me and my friends were going to this haunted maze and it was around Halloween time. It was one of my friend's parents that was taking us there and it was a group of 5 or 6 of my friends. While me and my friends were going through this maze, we were standing in a line and I was standing in the very back. So while we were walking, I ended up tripping on my shoelace and I fell to the side where there was curtains. It was the curtains where the workers would pop out and try to scare you. When I fell, I tried to yell for my friends, but because of the sound effects of the maze, they couldn't hear me. And by the time I got up, they were gone. So I started walking and I eventually got to a place where you could only go right or left, and I went left. And once I went left, I ended up in a circular room where there was 5 passageways. But there was also a group of teenage boys and I didn't even see them at first. All I know is I turned around and got grabbed, like for part 2. This is part 2 of the time I got lost in a haunted maze. Like I said, I lost track of my friends and I was looking for my friends and I ended up in a part of the maze where there was all these guys that I didn't even see at first. All I know is I turned around and I got grabbed. So I screamed. I was super young at the time. I was defenseless. I didn't know what to do. Those guys seemed like they were around their teenage years and they were laughing and making a joke out of it. One of them was laughing and they told their friend, grab her legs. And so the friend grabbed my legs and they were tugging me and pulling me, and then they started to pull my pants down. Panic was filling over my body. I couldn't even scream. When you're young, you'd always think you know what to do at these moments, but you really don't. You just freeze up. And that's exactly what I did. I just froze up. But thankfully, as soon as I felt my pants starting to get pulled down, another group of people turned the corner, and that's when the boys dropped me and ran, like for part 3. This is going to be part 3 of the time I got lost in a haunted maze. Like I said, another group of people started to turn the corner. That's when the boys dropped me and they ran. Those group of people didn't really get to see what was going on. So they asked me if I was okay. I told them that I was good. Me being super young and scared, I didn't really want to tell them what happened. My parents were also really iffy about me going out and I didn't want there to be a situation that would make them not trust me anymore. So they started to walk me out of the maze, you guys. And I'm guessing we were nearing towards the exit. But as we were nearing towards the exit, I completely forgot about the boys. I had realized that I didn't have a bracelet that I was wearing. Me being young and trying not to annoy the people that found me and were helping me get out of the maze, I wanted to turn around, but I didn't want to tell them that I needed to turn around because I lost something. So I ran back. As I was running back, trying to find this bracelet in this maze, I had ran into the same group of teenage boys who assaulted me. Like for part 4. This is the time my mom faked her death so she didn't have to take care of me and my siblings. Yes, this girl really faked her death. So at the time, I was 5 and my little brother was 3. It started off with my mom saying that she didn't feel well and she couldn't pick me up from school, so the bus would have to take me home. Well, a few months after, she started getting picked up from our house by this black car. She said that car was picking her up because of her so-called doctor's appointments. And she wasn't able to drive herself because she was too sick. Well, one day when this car came to pick her up, she never came home. Me and my little brother was sitting around for a couple days waiting for her to come home, but she never came home. And we were young, so we didn't do anything. Eventually, my aunt came over to our house and told my little brother and I that our mom had passed away and that she was cremated and they kept the ashes. So our aunt started taking care of us. Until one day I saw my aunt getting picked up by that same black car. That's when I started to get suspicious of everything and I decided to check these ashes. When I checked, it was flour. Like for part 2. This is part 2 of the time my mom faked her death so she didn't have to take care of me and my siblings. Like I said, my aunt told me that my mom had died and they cremated her and they let her keep the ashes and that she was going to start taking care of us. Me not knowing how long the cremating process actually took at the time since I was so young, I believed her. Until one day I saw my aunt getting picked up by the same black car that my mom used to get picked up by before she died. That's when I decided to check these supposed ashes and it was actually flour. So one day when my aunt got picked up by this black car, I decided to follow her. I didn't have a car. I was 5 years old, so I had to follow them by walking and hiding behind bushes. I was able to follow them up the street, and once they turned the corner, and there I saw my mom standing on the side of the street. That's when I see the car stop and I see my aunt get out and approach my mother. She tells my mom to give her money for covering for her and taking care of me and my little brother. Mom says she faked her death because my dad wasn't in our lives and she didn't want to take care of us anymore. I'm older now and I cut her off completely and I have full custody of my little brother.
Can you see me breathing? Standing here without you, and I can see it's midnight. And can I live without you? Can you see me breathing? Standing here without you, and I can see it's midnight. And can I live without you? Can you see me breathing?
Runs up to the door. A toddler that looks exactly like one of the kids that I was babysitting. And so the police arrested the girlfriend and the police arrested the dad for kidnapping 3 children. Mom finally got her kids back and everything was good. The kids were not harmed in any way. This all happened in the span of like a week or 2. The mom actually ended up coming to me and personally apologizing about how she acted. I told her it was no biggie because anybody would act like that in a situation where their kids were gone. And I continued to babysit her kids. Here's another babysitting horror story. And how my babysitter almost killed me and my baby sister. So it first started when my parents hired a babysitter for us. At first she was really sweet and then she started being really mean out of nowhere. She started hitting us when we would cry and she would blow cigarette smoke in our face. One time when she was driving us home from the grocery store, my baby sister was crying really hard the whole entire car ride. When we got home, she got me out of the car and brought in the groceries, but she left my 2-year-old sister in the car. It was 103 degrees. And she left her in there. That's honestly when I first started becoming scared of her. But why I became terrified of her is because one time my parents went on vacation for like a week. And one night my babysitter ordered pizza. My parents sent the babysitter the money for it. It was for all of us, but she wanted to get anchovies on the pizza. I told her I didn't really want that, but she ordered it anyway. When the pizza came, I didn't really want to eat it. Instead of her being like, well, I'll just make you something else, she locked me into a room for 3 days. She would only let me out to use the bathroom, but I wasn't allowed to eat anything. After that, she made starving us a regular thing. Then my parents came back and took us to the hospital for a checkup, like for part 2. This is part 2 of my babysitting horror story. So like I said, my parents came back from vacation and took us to the hospital for a checkup. They took us to the hospital because they noticed we were getting really skinny. When we got to the hospital, the doctor said my 2-year-old baby sister only weighed 19 to 20 pounds. and I was 13 at the time. I only weighed 90 pounds. The look on my mom and dad's face was enough. So when we got back into the car, I finally told them about what the babysitter had been doing. Now hold on tight, because the way my mama reacted to this, you would have thought somebody possessed her. Immediately, my mom started going off on my dad, like yelling and screaming at him. And he just had his hands in his face. I was so confused as to what was going on. See, I didn't know my dad when I was younger. He passed away before I was born. And so I found out that my current dad at the time wasn't my real dad. And I didn't know the truth until this whole babysitting situation. She babysat me for like a month and then my parents fired her. I'm 23 now. I honestly could have forgotten all about her. Well, just last year, my mom told me that babysitter was my dad's ex-wife. Well, anyways, this is what my mom did to my stepdad's ex-wife after we went to the hospital. This is part 3 of my babysitting horror story. So like I said, I finally told my parents about what the babysitter had been doing to me and my baby sister. I was so confused as to why my mom started going off on my dad right away after I told her. But 10 years later, I'm finally finding out that my babysitter was my stepdad's ex-wife. My mom told me that she had been really iffy about letting my stepdad's ex-wife babysit me and my little sister, but she only agreed with it to save money. So my mom told my dad to get out of the driver's seat. She got into the driver's seat and she started driving. I wasn't exactly sure where we were going and my dad didn't know either, but we ended up at the babysitter's house. Luckily for her, she wasn't home because my mom would have dropped her. Shit, she might have even got a murder charge that day. But my mom told me to get a rock and to just start chucking them at her windows. So that's what I did. There, me and my mom were chucking rocks at my babysitter's window. And my dad was watching us holding my baby sister. My mom didn't take her to court or anything. I'm not exactly sure why. Probably something to do with my dad. But my mom made my dad cut contact with her completely and they fired her.